Hi there! Welcome to A Creative Affair, a collection of conversations exploring creativity through the art of photography and so many other creative passions. I'm Len, a lifelong professional educator. I am currently running my own photography school here in Sydney, Australia. Teaching and inspiring others to grow creativity is my purpose in life. Not only am I highly skilled in it, I gain this great emotional joy from the educational process. Do you know, I can think of nothing better than getting outside somewhere beautiful with a bunch of creatives. Brie, I photograph tiny native orchids, and I can think of nothing better than spending a day in an exotic flower garden smelling the flowers.
I'm picturing you doing this. And I am Brie. I am I'm in Austin, Texas. I'm a Texas-based nature and landscape photographer, and I'm a coach for creative minds. And guess what? Now I'm a podcast host. I also never thought I would be any of those things. It just seems kind of crazy to me, but it's pretty amazing. And I also think it's amazing what we can all create when we put our minds to it. And just by way of, you were talking about smelling, I adore perfume.
Oh, yum.
I know. My life, I haven't worn a lot of perfume in my life, but my life was changed by a saleswoman at a boutique in the Heathrow airport about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago now. Okay, so quick little mini story. I had hours to waste, and I just kept circling and peeking in this store, and finally I went in and I had this beautiful long scarf on that I had purchased in Berlin, and I was on my way home. The reason I'm wearing this scarf is because I couldn't fit it in my suitcase. I'd stuffed it so full.
Yes, we all have that.
And the woman said, "Oh, you're traveling? You must." She was Turkish with a beautiful accent, and I can't replicate it, but it was beautiful. And she just spritzed me all over about 8 times and said, "You must smell beautiful when you travel." And I was sold. Done. I purchased 3 bottles, and now I have even more. And I actually mix and match them, and that's my creative thing I do for sometimes. And I'm wearing some today, so I'm sorry you can't smell any.
Oh no, I'm missing out on that
Yes, you
gorgeous
are.
smell of you, Brie.
Right? I won't tell you what something is falling in my house. I won't tell you what it smells like, but it's beautiful. It's actually a flower, so there you go.
Oh, well, there you go. And I love smelling the flowers.
And I sometimes wear it when I want to feel inspired or when I'm working on something. And so coincidentally, today's topic is inspiration. So here we go.
Isn't it fascinating that we can find inspiration from a smell?
Right.
I find that absolutely fascinating. Apparently, smells are also incredibly good at triggering memories and emotional responses. And no wonder that we can get inspiration from something like that. And also interesting in your story there, Brie, is that doing something like mixing and matching your perfumes in the morning can be a creative act, which can also be totally inspirational and fascinating.
Yeah,
Absolutely
sometimes
fascinating.
I mix 3 of them. So there you go. Yeah, I love the fact that you can have a memory from them, so there's that one, always that one in particular. I think of my travels, and I also think, I'm sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. We both are doing this from our homes. We don't have special studios here. So I think on the last one, there were birds on yours and I have a dog on mine. So, this is how we roll. So, but I think there are so many ways we can have inspiration, and I just do that sometimes for a little boost, and I put that on. And I don't do it when I am going out to hike because I actually want to smell the smells of the outside, right? But there's so many ways that we can find inspiration. So I want to talk about some ways we find inspiration, but first I think it would be great to talk about why we actually want it. Because sometimes we all know we want it, right? I want to be inspired. You want to be inspired. We all want inspiration, but why do we actually want it? Like, what is the thing? Like, what is it? What is the reason we want that drives us to go out and get the inspiration, right? Because sometimes we're doing this very purposefully. And so for me, the reason I want inspiration is just so I can be creative, right? It's pretty easy. And we do talk about that in our first full episode. It's called What is Creativity? So we talk all about like why, the why and how and what of being creative. So you can go back and listen to that. I'll put a link to that one in the show notes. But why do you want inspiration, Len?
So I was trying to analyze what you're saying there, and it sounds like it's a motivational thing. That it actually is a lifter, and it's like a carrot or something that pulls us towards creativity. It's putting out when we talked about our smelling the smells and going back to a memory, it becomes a trigger. And as a creative, we're looking for so many different triggers or things to set ourselves up to be in a creative space. And for me, and I was just wondering if this is for you too, that inspiration is a motivating element that will actually get us, get our juices and our ideas and our thoughts bubbling behind us so that we actually go out and do something rather than just sit and think about it. Although I think that's a very, very good thing, is to let your mind wander off, but that's another whole issue. But motivational. I think inspiration for me is so much about motivation and finding that motivation to go and be creative.
Yeah. It's for me as well. And one thing I like to write down notes because then because I'm thinking, you and I are thinking about what we're going to discuss, and we're really putting some real thought and effort into really figuring out some of the underlying reasons for all of these things. And besides just that creativity and the motivation, it going to find inspiration, it feeds my soul. And that is actually one of the things that we talk about in our first, and I think it's the what is creativity. But for me, it feeds my soul. And even if I was going to say, even if I never use that in my art, but I don't think we can separate that. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it helps me satisfy this desire for input, and there's something that I get out of it. And the reason, and just by way of information, I really think the reason we do anything is because of how we think we're going to feel. And so when we're looking for inspiration, when I am looking for inspiration, it's because of how I'm going to feel. Like I feel amazing when I have that emotion inside of me, when I feel inspired. And Len, I don't know if you remember this, but in that episode, do you know what you said?
No, I got a very short memory on some.
I know, but
words.
I wrote down this quote that you said. You said, "My greatest joy is creating for myself." And so I see how when you're looking, possibly I mean, I'm just curious, when you either look for inspiration or feel inspired, how joyful is that? Because you're like, now you can take that and be creative. And of course, you're saying here in this quote that that's your greatest joy. And that's what, I mean, amazing. That's what I want too. I find so much satisfaction in the act of creating, and even more so when I'm doing it from something that I feel like a newly inspired from, like some new inspiration. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Like I may now actually be paying attention when I wear perfume and maybe what I'm creating, now that I've made some connections here. So I'm curious about what that will look like in the future. Maybe I'll report back.
I'm really interested in this idea about going out to find inspiration as opposed to finding something inspirational. And I think that these perhaps are maybe two separate things. And I know I don't sit down with a book of other people's photographs seeking inspiration. I don't mentally sit down and go, well, what can I take from this? I go into the process to enjoy other people's work. And I sit down and totally immerse myself wandering through their work, as I do in an art gallery. I don't go to the art gallery and say, well, I'm going to find inspiration. I go because I love to go. And I absolutely enjoy being there. And then while I'm wandering through those artworks, an idea springs up in my mind that I then lock away as that moment of inspiration, or that little thing to take to go and play with. And it's an idea rather than something that's actually finished. So I don't think that I actually search for inspiration in that sense. I think it's a natural process that I find while I'm living my life to the fullest, and immersing myself in work, other people's artworks, people. Being a community member, being a family member, being a father, all those things, that immersion pulls out, and they all become those inspirational moments. Does that make sense to you? Rather, it's something that happens, and rather than something that I set out to do.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like the way you have designed your life is that you are doing things naturally, that you are just doing things naturally and finding inspiration, and just being inspired by what you normally do. Because the things that you enjoy are also inspiring to you. I don't know if that was just made it like a little circle, like a little spiral, right? But I think that's a beautiful thing, that we create a life that where we have regular input of
stimulus.
Stimulus, or so I was thinking beauty, enjoyment, maybe of things that we think are like creatively stimulating, right? And
emotionally engaging.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people read, and we were talking about here, like, where do we find this inspiration, right? So a lot of people read, you open art, photo, books of photography, and I'm starting a little collection, and I don't know where to put them now. So
you'll have to make space.
I know I'm going to, but I am trying to make time for myself to just enjoy them, because partly because I know I will find inspiration in them, right? And so it's maybe not necessarily that we're going out to look for it, but we are doing things where we know we're going to find inspiration and inspiration that we really want. But sometimes I think in general, people can get so busy in their lives of doing the work and doing all the things that we do. I mean, if you drive a car, your oil needs changing and all those, just all of those little daily things that sometimes we forget that we want that and we want that inspiration. And so sometimes we really do have to make time for it and it's a very specific way. We're saying we want to sit down and I'm going to take the book of photography, for example, and it could be any genre, anything you're interested in, that draws you to it, right? But saying, I have a high chance of being inspired by this person's work. I like the feeling that I get, that I have when I'm looking at it, when I'm enjoying it. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to find some inspiration within this book and maybe notice things, even though I've looked at it 10 times before. I'm going to find something in here that's going to stand out to me that I've actually never seen before. And that's a new inspiration. So that's also interesting, right? To go back to the things that we really enjoy.
Yes,
and finding
definitely
new inspiration.
Do you know, Brie, I actually very rarely go through a book cover to cover and totally immerse myself in every single artwork in there. I actually dip into them and sit with them and take in a small amount of ones that are catching my attention at the time, that I'm feeling an emotional connection with, and then I sit with them and enjoy them, and for my own entertainment I analyze them and think about them, and from that process comes up an inspirational thought. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. And then I'll go back another day and there's, my coffee table's covered in books, and I'll pull out a different one and I'll open it and I'll flick through, and then I'll find something that really connects with me, and then I spend time with them. And so I'm always going back and revisiting books over and over and over, trying to enjoy them fully. Ralph Gibson often says to his photography students, like, how often do you actually ever spend real time with an artwork? I know this at an art gallery. When I'm standing in front of an artwork that really, really moves me, I stand there for 10 minutes. And I'm totally engaged and immersed. And then, we're wandering past something that doesn't engage me. I don't even stop. If it's not intellectually, emotionally, physically drawing me in, I don't bother too much worrying about it. And I search for those things that connect with me personally. And of course, it's going to keep spiraling back to me because my art is always about me. And learning to understand who I am through this process is incredibly deeply satisfying, deeply educational, and profound, moving, and is inspirational.
Yeah, I was going to mention I love going to art galleries, and every city I'm in, I try and go, and I can never go through the whole thing. I'll pick 3 areas to go. I mean, I could probably just go through one area and go, okay, I guess I'm going to have to come back to the city like 10 more times so I can see the rest. But, maybe I'll go to 3 areas. I did that in Boston. I just did that in San Antonio, and every time I go, I find new. I love seeing the new things and seeing what
Yes.
people create. And the thing is I will look at things sometimes that don't necessarily catch my eye, but maybe look interesting, and I try and understand it a little bit more, because sometimes when I try and spend some time with it and understand, then that's when I have the inspiration, because maybe something doesn't catch my eye at first, but then when I go a little bit deeper, I have a deeper understanding, and that's when I get the inspiration. I want to share something that I did write. There's a book called Steal Like an Artist, and shout out to my friend Michael who told me about it. But in here, so do you mind if I read a couple of quotes, Lynn?
No, please do.
I love quotes.
I've done a presentation on this book because I find the work inspiring and interesting, and have deeply engaged with Austin's book. Actually, I have all of his books here on my shelf.
Oh, fabulous! I just have the one because I've just, I'm doing a deep dive, but you can't do everything, right? And so, but for anyone that doesn't know, this book, Steal Like an Artist, it feels so short, but there's so much like meat in there. And so it's very digestible. So we highly recommend it. We'll put a link to find that in the show notes. But so there's a couple of quotes that are in here that I think are really amazing. And one thing he says is, the artist is a collector. So we're all collectors. We're just going around finding inspiration, like you said, drawing out a little bit, storing it in a file, right? Like, so we're just, and this is part of creativity. I mean, we talked in that episode about creativity, is taking all the little pieces and putting it together in a unique way. And that's
we have a bird here in Australia called a bowerbird, and it travels the country looking for coloured objects, and different types of them have different pre-collections. And the one in the Blue Mountains that I know very well loves blue things. So when you find the bowerbird's nest, it's full of little blue feathers and blue leaves and blue berries, and now in our modern age it's got blue straws, blue clothes pegs and other blue things. So this bowerbird collects stuff to make a beautiful nest so he can woo his future lover to his nest. Now, I think that as an artist, as a collector, is an incredibly beautiful concept, that we have the whole world out there. We have so many influences that allowing them to come into us, and taking little bits from here and there is such a special thing to do. Now, there's only one thing about Austin's work. Some people find the word stealing a bit triggering, and sometimes I think it's not quite the right word, but I'm sure he's used that word to increase his hits on his website, that sort of overemphasis on the word. He doesn't actually mean appropriate other people's work and turn it into your own. He means take ideas from as many different places in the world that is absolutely possible. So many artists talk about this, that all art starts with reality. It has to start with something out there, and of course it can start from other people's work, and from our muses, and from Mother Nature. So I think reframing that word can be a very important part in a step of understanding what Austin is saying, because what he's saying is absolutely beautiful. Now, you've got another quote there. Did you want to read the next one?
Let me. I'll add a little something. No, it's okay. I'll add a little something to that. He does clarify in the book. There's a difference between stealing, right? You're taking a bit and then turning it into your own, versus copying, right? And so copying is like a direct, Like I'm going to do it exactly like someone else. And that's not where we want to be. We want to be finding inspiration. And I agree with you about the stealing part. But it feels like you're robbing someone else. But we are kind of taking the inspiration and putting it with other inspiration and turning it into something of our own. And so the other thing he says, let's see, he says a couple of things here. Your job is to collect good ideas. The more good ideas, and by the way, you get to decide what good ideas are, because that's what we get to decide what good means, right? So the more good ideas that you collect, the more you can choose from to be influenced by. And I would like to interject right now, like when I am being inspired by something in that moment, what that feels like for me. And so I actually wrote a little something in my book, because I don't keep my books pristine. I like mark them all up. I have little tabs, and you can see like I have little, all the things. So I wrote like, how do we know when something speaks to our soul? Like, how do we know when we're feeling inspired? Of course, we're like, ooh, I feel inspired. But for me, I wanted to like actually quantify it and say out loud what was happening in me, because this is a lot of the work I'm doing, is really having awareness of what is happening for me when I'm actually feeling inspired. So when I feel inspired, I have this like little hum vibration in my body. So I don't know if that feels like, and maybe everyone feels this a little bit different, right? My mind has like a little there's like a little tingling in my mind. Maybe it's kind of like an enlightened feeling, like I think I'm learning something here, right? And I get this like somehow this energy inside me, right? I don't know if you felt like this. When you feel inspired, you don't walk away feeling tired. You walk away feeling this extra energy. Like I just collected something that is maybe going to push me forward in my work. And anyway, I just kind of wanted to put that all into words, and maybe, yeah.
Is that the same feeling that you get when you know that you've got a beautiful photograph, or you've created a gorgeous artwork? Is there quite a similarity there? And I find this absolutely fascinating. We must do a whole episode on this, but you're describing to me physical feelings. I know as a kid, when people say, "Oh, feelings," there's something in our mind maybe, but you're talking about a tingling, an energy that comes into you that's so uplifting. The reason I asked that, for me, I think that's so similar. It's a rush through my whole body, and I can feel it.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a little different for everyone. When I am making a photograph that I just know with every fiber of my being is like something that I've really connected with and is going to be really special, that's kind of the similar feeling that I get. So yeah, I feel the same way. And by the way, in the work that I do, our emotions, we can call them something, but really we're calling them a name based on whatever is happening for us within our minds and our bodies. So I really think emotions are that like somatic connection between our mind and our body. And so, and our emotions are really the sensation in our body that we are calling a name. And so that's just a little.
They must be a chemical release that we're feeling.
Yeah.
There's something is going off in our body, a chemical reaction. There's something's being released, and we're actually feeling that through our bodies, and then we're using these words to describe them. And I'm wondering, as I'm sitting here listening and talking, that inspiration's on a scale for the release of probably the same chemicals that bring us happiness and excitement and engagement. I know that in the process of creating beautiful artworks, that the rush of chemicals through my body has been so powerful. I've been basically stoned off my head for about an hour afterwards, and unable to function because of it, and just giggling and laughing, and I haven't even been able to pick up the camera again for a period of time. And I actually label those peak photographic experiences because the amount of chemicals that have been released into my body have actually I feel them totally and totally overtake me. And I believe I'm addicted to them. And I actually go out hunting for this feeling. And it can be the light, the subject, my mood, my emotions, everything comes together. So when I go back to when I'm living life and I'm, reading books or poetry or watching movies, and I start to get this little rush of emotional response to something, being an artist and being in tune with myself and becoming really aware of it, I then know, there's something going on here. I need to actually cognitively think about that and figure out what is the inspiration, or how can I use this? What can I take from this to use in my art? So I'm actually always looking for inspiration without actually having my Sherlock Holmes thingo out looking for it. I'm just waiting for it to happen.
Right, and that's
I'm not
how we
searching.
know.
I'm waiting for it.
Right, and that's how, I love how you described it, because that's how we know we're being inspired, right? Is because of all of that happening. And I also, for me also, it's also, I also wanted to say it's a longing to create something in a similar way. I don't know if you have that longing. It's I see something or I hear something or whatever it is, and I'm like, I need to use this. Almost I'm driven to save it and use it in a similar way. And then we take all of these things that we're inspired by, and then we want to put them together, or maybe we're somewhere, we're in the act of creating, and all of a sudden we have this memory, and maybe the memory comes from this emotion that we feel, because I think our bodies remember this too. Our bodies remember the emotion and remember what it's like, and we're like, oh yeah, this is where I need to make this connection and put it in here. So so yeah, it's just I think it's a beautiful thing to really have this awareness of what's going on. And by the way, these are all not in any of the notes that we talked about, but and my mother-in-law, actually, I was talking to her today, and she said, as we create, because she writes, and she said, as we create, we have emotions, but as we have deeper, the act of creating can help us have deeper and deeper emotions. And when we connect with our emotions on such a deeper level, then we can actually that's when we're really doing that good creative work, is when we're connecting with those emotions, those deep emotions, because we've got different levels. So I just thought that was interesting. And so maybe we talk about that at a different time too.
I've noticed over my life that I've become more emotional.
Yes, me
as
too.
an artist. So the more time that I spend in the creative realm, and I've been doing it my whole life, I've become more in tune with my own feelings, and learning to surf them, follow them, listen to them, react to them is, to me, the key of becoming more effective as an artist. And expressing myself is actually tuning in to who I am as a person.
Yeah. Wait, let me pause, Lynn. I want to say, like, I also want to say that too, why we want inspiration is because I think we're all searching for this unique vision that we have, that, I don't know if we're like actively searching for it, but somehow when we are a creative, we're looking for a way to express ourselves in an individual way. And so as we are inspired in the ways that we just talked about, as we are inspired, we can use that to create our own unique vision, which can change over time too, as we have new inspirations too. So there's also a quote in Steal Like an Artist that Austin says. He says, if we're free from the burden, and by the way, just coaching note, we create the burden. So we create all this burden, right? There's no one creating it for us. We create it for ourselves. So if we're free from the burden of trying to be completely original, meaning we're trying to find our unique vision, right? Do something unique to ourselves. Yes. We can stop trying to make something out of nothing, and we can embrace influence instead of running away from it. And I think that speaks to like being in touch with who we are and really finding out who we are, so we can take all this inspiration and make something out of it, right? Like we don't have to run away from any kind of influence or inspiration, right? Because that's impossible. We get to collect that. We get to take that in and decide what we're going to do with it. So we sorry.
Are. The key to this is that we are all unique individuals, isn't it, Brie? That we are unique. Every single person on the earth is different from each other, and that's what makes the world such a beautiful place. And our art is inevitably going to be unique when it focuses on who we are and our own emotional response. And this is an issue I've suffered from my life, is this wanting to be unique, and it's blocked me up and messed me up so many times. And eventually coming to this place where I realised, well, I'm actually the unique one. All I have to do is be true to myself. True to my own interests, true to my own emotions, and therefore my work will be unique. And I don't need to worry about whether it's copying anyone or anything else, because I'm trying to be true to myself. So that burden does lift as I shift around with my way of thinking about how I'm approaching the art and the act of creativity.
And I think that can start with really listening to what, being aware of what we are inspired by. And I think back to, I'm discovering that I like to make images that are less complicated, that are a little bit more minimal. I think, and I'm discovering this kind of in my journey. And I just thought today, when I was thinking about all the ways that I like to be inspired, all of the like composers and artists, and I love the music of Philip Glass. I don't know if anyone's listened to that.
Oh, yeah, I do too. And I love, is it Connor Squatzy is one of his works?
Yeah,
yes, it is.
I forget how to pronounce that, but he has some beautiful minimalist music. And I remember hearing this because, I majored in music at university. And I remember hearing his work for the very first time and thinking, what is this? I've never heard anything like this before. And just listening to it over and over again and finding new pieces and new pieces. And now I see that now I'm making some connections between that I found inspiring to what I like doing now. It's such an interesting connection to make. And now guess what I'm going to go do? I'm going to play some more Philip Glass next time I'm like editing or, out doing my photography.
Can I also suggest that you actually track down those movies, Connor Squatzy, Power Squatzy, and then the cinematographer Ron Fick, Flick, is it Fick? He goes on to do a film called Baraka. and that's all really quite connected. And Baraka was shot in 70 millimeter, and I was in the front row when it was when I got to see it in Sydney at a small theatre by myself virtually, just to see how beautiful the print is. And talking about inspiration, all of those films were incredibly inspirational to me as a young person, and I still have copies of them in my DVD collection. Absolutely beautiful. So I love Philip Glass's work, and it's fascinating that now we actually have a link there to something visual.
Right, right.
Which is beautiful.
And so I think what we're doing is interspersing some different ways we can find inspiration, right? And one of them is music. Of course, so many people are inspired by music. It's so, there's something, and I don't know the science behind it, but there's something about the music and the auditory that influences us in so many different ways, and I think it would be interesting if you make music, if that's your creative work, who are you inspired by, what inspires you, and also if you do something visual or not, or you're speaking, what music inspires you, and what are the similarities there to that, right? Another way that I'm inspired, I like impressionist work, which is also, I think, a little bit more minimalist. I like Georgia O'Keeffe. She, as an artist, I don't think she's necessarily minimalist, but certainly her work is not busy. She has some muted tones, and so I'm finding a lot of similarities in the art I'm inspired by, and the music I'm inspired by, and what I'm doing in my own personal work. Not that I have to copy Georgia O'Keeffe, I don't, right? But just interesting how that is now translating to what I'm doing.
Well, as you study Georgia's work and have a really good look at it, and you actually work out what is exciting about it to you, you can take those elements as your inspiration. Like you just mentioned then the colour palette.
Yes.
And just taking the colour palette away and playing with it, and you end up with a gorgeous, soft set of pastel-y muted tones from one painting, and from another one you end up with a fiery, feminist confrontation, not a confrontation, but a passionate, emotional thing on another one. And each artwork has a different tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
I'm
so inspirational.
Yeah, I find so I went to a gallery and I walked around. So what I do, this is how I collect some of my inspiration. I just have a little folder on my phone and my photos, and I really just take my phone around and click things. So I'm always taking a picture, making a little quick iPhone photo of the sky. I think the sky is incredibly inspirational, always different colors. I love my clouds, but I think that's, for me, that's important to kind of have a visual reference of some of the things. So if I'm going to an art gallery and I can take photos, I do. I sometimes get real close and take photo of something like a detail. I did that recently with a Van Gogh. I mean, the colors and the texture was amazing. And I had to snap a little photo of it so I could remember it, so I can refer back to it and have that with me,
I think, Brie, it's a good point to move into that question about how do we actually manage our inspirations and to keep them. But just before we do that, Georgia O'Keeffe's partner, Stiglitz, actually loved photographing clouds, and there's a little tiny connection, and he also loved photographing her and her beautiful hands.
Oh, that's
is
right.
another thing that's
Yes.
fascinating there.
Yes.
But Ways of managing and keeping your inspirations is important. I was just reading something by Peter Eastway the other day, and he actually called them references. I was at another workshop with a gentleman, a photographer called Peter Coulson, and he actually had a folder in his computer called Inspirations, and he collected JPEGs in there of other people's work and advertising and copies, and they kept it there. I have folders absolutely everywhere, and there's if I'm on Instagram, I actually save things into collections. I have an account on Pinterest. I have a Evernote on my phone, and I'm making notes there. But do you know what my absolute favourite one, Brie, is a journal with blank pages and a pencil, and I draw, write, and I write them down. I make little drawings, and whether it's a dream, a book that I'm reading, a random thought, a picture, they all go in to some sort of recording to remind myself. And I do that not because I spend hours going back through them all. The very act of writing it down and drawing a picture of it is a educational memory trigger for me, and it the act of writing it down or drawing the picture reinforces it into my mind. So when I'm actually out creating, the inspiration can come back to me intuitively without so much conscious effort on sometimes. And at other times it's incredibly conscious, where I using an inspiration to go out and play with something quite specifically at that time. Do you have other ideas or ways that you keep and manage your inspirations?
Well, I'm terrible at journal keeping. I was actually going to ask you if you go back, through everything. I'm
on a rainy days, yes, sometimes.
Right. So I think for me, it's that little like iPhone snapshot. I mean, if I see something in a book I like, I will actually take a picture of it and put it in that file. So I think, that's a little visual collection. I don't always go back through it, right? And I'm just curious, I would be curious how other people do this too. I assume, a lot of people keep journals, and I would say, if you're in our audience and you aren't keeping track of what inspires you, oh, please do. Because how will you go back? I can't remember all of it for me. And so how can you go back and remember unless you have like this photographic memory? So if you have a photographic memory, forget I said this. But I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to have that collection in some way, to be able to go back and have it kind of contained and tailored to who you are. And what an amazing thing is to look back through, your inspiration. Because I will do that. I'll go through my images after I've been to a gallery and go, oh, yes, I love all of these. Oh, my goodness, I remember that. Right. And then it kind of happens all over again. And that's a way we can actually get the inspiration on purpose. Like you talked about, just looking through the books and having the inspiration happen to you. If we want it on purpose, this is an amazing way, because then it's kind of all there. So I don't think it's inspiration overload, but then then it would be a way to see some of the similarities maybe between it all. And so maybe you take a still of a movie. I know you talked, in our previous conversation before we started recording, you told me about some stills of movies. So there's so many different ways we can be inspired, right? Poetry, you could take a clip of poetry and put that into your collection. And I'm wondering if a poem would combine with, a movie still and make it be something that's cohesive for you, right? Or anything, what are the other ways in the world that we see that we can find inspiration just maybe as we move about our world.
One of the things about creatives is their ability to collect ideas from multiple sources and bring them together. And it's also apparently a sign of genius, people that love sorting things and putting them into categories and mentally finding places to put things for
y'all are
for
geniuses.
use later.
You heard it from Len.
That's
y'all
right.
are geniuses.
Well, yes, as creatives we are.
Right.
But we are. I think our bucket or our journal of ideas or our folder on our phone of snaps, it needs to be deep. I feel very strongly about this, that we just don't want one idea in there. We want hundreds to be mixing up into the stew of ideas that are floating around in the back of our mind, rather than just one solid one that's has us so focused and becomes a constraint and maybe a burden to us. That we're collecting lots of them and throwing them in, and so we can dip in and pull out little bits and actually put them together in our own unique way that is inspiring and interesting for us.
And I would say if we have this collection that's deep, when we go back and go through it, I don't think we're actually totally consciously doing that. I think, and we've talked about this before, that we're doing this on a subconscious level as we look through, as we kind of piece through all the things that inspire us on such a deep level, that our brains are like, because we're creative and our brains like to have something to work on, our brains are like naturally chewing on some of these things and like, how do they fit together? And then that's when we go back to the creative process and we have these aha moments, because we've given our minds all of this inspiration, and all of a sudden we just know how 5 of them can fit together to do whatever it is that we're going to do, right? So that is the beautiful thing about having so much inspiration and just going out and actually like on purpose looking for it, and then sometimes not on purpose and just doing something we enjoy, but kind of secretly hoping that we find it, right?
It's really, really fascinating when we stop and we look at our work and we create something, and yes, it's beautiful and we love it and we're excited about it, and then we ask ourselves, what can we learn from it? What's this teaching me? And I think art is a fantastic educator and is able to educate us. And when I'm looking at something that excites me of my own, and it takes me a lot of time, and often it surfaces through conversations with other people so often, I suddenly start to realise that something from my past is coming back through the art. And once I actually identify it, it jumps out like a sore thumb. It's like, oh, that colour palette is from that painting that I loved when I was 15, or I stood in front of over here and it really affected me and moved me here. Or perhaps my photographs look like an etching or a lithograph that I was obsessed with when I was at art school, when I was in my still a teenager, studying to be an artist. And somehow I've actually worked my way back to creating art that is about those things that were important to me in the past. So by living a full life and continually adding into this bucket of inspirations, allowing them to influence us and accepting that, our work becomes so much more deeper. And who knows when it comes back out and we get to use it. Some of the things that go in there will obviously never come out. If we're taking from everything in our lives, movies, books, advertising, reading, engaging with other people, clothing, smells, conversations. It's going to keep going in, isn't it? And we can't make enough art to pull out absolutely everything in there. So we keep collecting. We find a means to keep collecting, and we keep throwing stuff in there. And it just comes out when it's ready, rather than forcing it out onto the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that it comes out when it's ready. And I think sometimes our minds know when we are, when we're ready for that. You talked about some different way, where we find some inspiration. And I was in that book, Steal Like an Artist. There was a quote from, and he's in film. I can't tell you what he does, but his name is Jim, and I'm not going to pronounce his last name right because I'm terrible at this. Jim Jarmusch. I'm so sorry, Jim. Probably he'll never listen to this. But there is this quote from him in there, and it says, "Nothing is original." So everyone, nothing is original. Someone's going to take what you do and be inspired by it and turn it into something else. Like, it's just going to go and you could read that quote in a minute, Len. Nothing is original. Steal from anywhere that resonates with inspiration or fuels your imagination. Devour old films, new films, music, books, paintings, photographs, poems, dreams. That's interesting, right? Random conversations, architecture. I've seen some beautiful architecture. It's amazing. Like, I'm super inspired. By the way, I'm not done with this quote, but I'm super inspired by the Sacré Coeur. Oh gosh. Okay, I'll pause and I'll remember it in a second. Okay, architecture, bridges, street signs, trees. There you go, Len. Trees, clouds for me,
yes,
bodies of water. Yeah, right. Light and shadows. Select only things to steal from that speak directly to your soul. This is what we've been talking about, right? If you do this, your work, and then in parentheses, and theft will be authentic. So just the ones that speak to your soul, right? And you'll know it when you feel all of those things, that longing to create and all of those things. And by the way, I thought of it. It's in Barcelona. It's called the Sagrada Familia. If you haven't been there, it's Gaudi's work. It's the most amazing piece of architecture I've ever been in, and the inside with it's so organic. And anyway, go look it up. Maybe I'll put a link to the show notes.
Was it never finished? I think it was a lifetime project creating it. Is that right? I can't remember.
Yeah. So he's passed on now, but it's been years and decades. But it is getting finished, and I'll have to look. But at some point they will finish it. Actually, there's like some date out there, and then they'll have a big celebration. So.
Amazing. Imagine creating something that keeps getting created after you've passed away,
right?
And is bigger than your whole lifetime.
Right. I just think that's amazing. What was that quote you write? Do you know where that quote came from, by the way?
No.
Okay,
Which one?
This is the quote that Len put in here. By the way, I'm sorry this is filled with quotes. We just love it. I think maybe all these quotes are inspirational for us, and so we put them in here. So there you go. You wrote, all art references the art that comes before it. So that's what we were saying. Like, nothing's original. It's all going to reference everything else because everyone is inspired by something else. Someone's going to be inspired by you. Another person's going to be inspired by your work that inspired them. And it's just going to kind of like an infinity mirror, down into the eternities. So.
Yeah. And when your art references all art that's come before it, someone else that looks at your art who has seen something that is mentally and emotionally connecting for them will connect it for you, and the artwork will connect in their minds. It's quite a big concept and one that's worth a lot of exploring and playing with, but we can't create in a vacuum. we need to be honest about that. Everything. We had this whole world history before us, and it influences everybody else in that process. And part of this is we can't control what other people think and feel about our own artwork. As we're making it, we have our relationship to it. And then as a viewer, everyone has their own relationship to it. And they're going to bring in all the references of all the artworks in the past that they've seen as they're viewing your artwork. And I think it's quite a big concept to play with, and maybe one that we might even come back to at another time as well.
It's kind of a beautiful thing, and because I think it connects us in so many ways, right? Because we all have our own unique way we see the world, all the ways that we're inspired, and then we put that together. That's why, I was just thinking exactly what you were saying, is that we can't control what anyone thinks or feels. We can't control how anyone is inspired by our work. And that's why we want to create something that is personal and unique to us. Because when we do that, that's when we get all of the satisfaction for ourselves, and when we are true to ourselves. And I think when we do that, then other people will find the inspiration in our work, and maybe things that we didn't even know that they would see, because they all come from, with their own unique perspective. So I think it's all so beautiful.
It's basically, it's impossible not to have influences, isn't it? And it's impossible not to come to an artwork without our own rose-coloured glasses on. And the more we acknowledge this and actually play with it, the stronger position that we're in. And the more honest and open we can be with that process, the easier it is to be in this creative state. I find this whole conversation on inspiration absolutely fascinating, because it's so tied up with the actual act of creativity, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't stand alone as its own little element that you must do, or you have to do before you do it. It's actually automatically part of it and tied in, and part of a bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah, and because the thing is we can't force ourselves to be inspired. I just think that's interesting. I don't find that I can force myself to be inspired in any way. That's why when you said, you read books that you enjoy, and you kind of have set yourself up for that. But also because I can never get away from being inspired and having influences, I want to go and look for it all, right? Not all of it, but I want on purpose to go out and find ways I can be inspired, because I know that I'm not going to live in a vacuum. There's no way I cannot be influenced or inspired, right? And so I want to go and put myself in places where I can be inspired by some really amazing things. And I want to do it more and more and more, because as I do that, then I have more and more fuel for my own creative work and my creative art. So I have one last quote.
Yes.
Love
to hear it.
I think he's in film, but I loved it. It's Jean-Luc Godard, and he says, "It's not where you take things from." So remember, it is about the inspiration, but it really is about you. So it's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to.
Isn't that just lovely?
It is.
And that is so right, isn't it? It doesn't matter where we get our inspirations from. All that matters is how we use them and where we take them to. And by taking them, and doing something with them, do you know, we're actually honouring the that inspiration itself, honouring the original artwork or the whatever it was that did that inspiration. I think that's a beautiful quote and a lovely one for us to wrap up on, Brie, isn't it? Well, Brie, what another inspiring conversation. And we should add conversations to our list there, as well as clouds, trees and dreams, as an inspiration. And yes, of course the conversation is an inspiration as well. And I'm feeling so inspired. I love sharing this with you and with others. And I hope you're enjoying it as a listener as well. And, we have a few questions for you as usual. The first one is, where do you get your inspiration from? And what did we miss? Like we only had things that we could think of that were inspiring for us or that we've noticed that are inspired for other people. So we reach out to you and ask you to please tell us where do you get your inspiration from and what did we miss? And we challenge you. We love to challenge people, don't we? That's our job, isn't it, Brie, as educators and mentors and helping people grow. Why don't you actually start a collection of inspirations today? If you haven't got one, start one. And whether it's a snap with your iPhone or your phone, whether it's a visual diary, I've actually got a whole shelf of visual diaries and they're spread throughout my whole house. And there's one in my camera bag, there's one in my travel bag, there's one in my truck, there's one beside my bed, and there's one right beside me right now in my studio. And there's pens and pencils spread throughout the whole house. So wherever whenever that inspiration comes, I can write it down somewhere. And I wish I was organised and it was all in one, but no, there's 20 or 30 of them. Start yours today, whether maybe it's a folder on your computer, desktop, or perhaps you find an app that you can actually take web clips from and store them. Perhaps it's even just a bookmark in your web browser.
That's called Pinterest. Len, that's called Pinterest.
Oh, yeah, that's another one. No, that's a great one for keeping photos, isn't it? And artworks, visual inspirations. I also keep articles and words for my inspirations as well, and drawings. So if you do have some and you want to tell us, and we encourage you to keep the conversation with us going, because this is all about conversations. Why don't you engage with us? Write to us. You can email us at creativeaffairpodcast.com. And, of course, that's where you can subscribe to our podcast. And, of course, you can follow us on all your favourite readers as well. Well, do you know, Brie, I've spent the last 2 years teaching online, and I've been recording my presentations on video. And I have over 100 hours of video on photography, composition, creativity and inspiration. And I even have a full hour presentation on Austin Kleon's book, Steal Like an Artist, in there, which is a fascinating thing that you've picked that up as well, a fabulous thing. Anyway, if you're interested, you can gain access to there and my online classes at Lens Club. And you can find that at lensschool.com. And yes, of course, I run workshops and tours in flesh, and I can't wait to get out and do some more of those. So if you ever want to join me, we can smell the flowers together and find some inspiration. And maybe Brie will be with us and we can smell her gorgeous perfume as well.
I will wear it. Maybe one day we can do the in-person thing.
Oh, I can't wait to smell it then.
I know. Well, it really is a beautiful work that we both do to help inspire and mentor others. And as a coach for creatives, I do this too. I help my clients that may or may not have already found their inspiration and vision, and maybe, not maybe, but need help with their mindset to bring their dreams to life. So if this is you, go to www.creativemindscoach.com. You can sign up for a discovery call, and I'll help you make a plan to achieve your creative dreams. Isn't that awesome? So before we go, a little help. If you find value in our conversation, help us, please help us reach more listeners by sharing this podcast with another creative that you know and love. And we just thank you so much for that. Because our circle are photographers, and please help us spread this to all kinds of other creatives. So thank you so much. And as always, links to everything are in the show notes. You can visit us at acreativeaffairpodcast.com. And you can also sign up for our newsletter. Just go to our website and click subscribe. So that's it. Len, I loved this conversation. And
Oh, I do too.
it was so much more than I thought it would be. And I think that happens every single time because we don't write everything down that we're going to talk about, but it ends up being so beautiful at the end, and I love it. So.
Oh, I do too. It's so wonderful. It's inspiring.
Absolutely.
And it's so engaging. So engaging.
I agree. Well, until next time, enjoy your flowers. And I will enjoy my perfume. And we will talk next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, and thank you, and enjoy.